at this level K. So this is my level 0. Level 0 has one node here. When you come down, level 2, assuming that every node has k children, at level 1 here, I'll see k nodes. Coming down to level 2, so each of these k nodes again have k nodes. So is it okay? So in this particular graph, it's going to be 2 to the power k. Okay, I again took it to be k. So assume that let me call it level L. So we have here 2 raised to the power L nodes. So in general, if every node has k children each, so instead of 2, if I have k children each, how many nodes will I find it? And let me say level n. L is also a bit normal here. Let me take n. So here I have k nodes, then I come down, I'll have k into k nodes, because each of these k nodes again have k nodes, so on and so forth. So I'll actually see k to the power n nodes here. So that is how this tree grows. Now assume that there is a disease which is spreading on this network. We are having two parameters here. One is k, so we call k the average number of contacts every person has, that is k. And we have one more parameter p. P is nothing but the contagiousness of the disease. On a scale of 0 to 1, how contagious is the disease here? So this person here, which is at the root, is infected. So what is the average number of infections he produced? What is the expected number of people who will be infected at level 1? So at level 0, there is one person who is infected. So what is the expected number of people who will be infected at level 1? We can use the concept of indicator variables here. So we can say that the number of people who are infected at level 1 is equal to, so with every variable here, we can associate a probability. So we have k people here. So it equals to probability that the first person is infected. Let me simply write down as P1 plus probability that the second person is infected, so on and so forth, plus the probability that the kth person is infected. Probability that the first person is infected is simply P. For the second person, it is P. So it comes out to be P into K. So P into K is the average number of secondary infections each person produces. So this root node here, it produces P into K number of infections at the first level. Now assuming that this node gets infected at the first level, it will again produce P into K number of expected infected individuals at the second level, so on and so forth. So if you will do a little bit of math here, you can figure out that the expected number of people infected at the nth level is going to be turned out to be P into K to the power of n. So in this particular case, in branching model, we call this P into K as the reproductive number. Like we saw it for the compartmental model. Here it's the formula for reproductive number. And again, if this reproductive number, again, if this reproductive number P into K is greater than 1, then the disease will exist in the network. And if P into K is less than 1, that is, there is less than one average infected person at each level, the disease will ultimately die from the network. So there is a very nice derivation for this. Right now, I'm not going into that. If we'll have some time after finishing everything and we'll be interested, we'll go into the definition and look more into it. So that is how you model the spread of diseases in the absence of any network. Now moving to the spreading of ideas, innovations and behaviors. So there are two kind of models we use. The first one is the herding behavior and second one is the information cascades. So before we start with this, I would want you all to watch a quick video. So again, like yesterday, once you are done watching the video, just type +1 in the chat window followed with your observations so that I know that you have finished watching it. Just give me a moment, I'll share the link here. You can find the link of the video in the chat window. Okay, so anyone would like to share your observations from this video? I hope you enjoyed the video. So this video was a perfect example of herding behavior, and you actually see it in many facets of your life. So it is when you have to choose between two technologies, or you have to decide which brand of soap, or let's say which version of iPad to buy. So we actually most of the times we go to the online websites. Nowadays we look at the reviews, how many people have purchased that, and so on and so forth. So we rely on what other people have to do to decide what we are going to do. So a quick question, how many of you think that it is logical? So whatever happened in the video, two people stood up and started clapping and then everyone followed them. So how many of you think that it is logical to do this? If you think it is logical, type a +1 in the chat window, else type a -1, or you can also unmute yourself and speak. No one would want to say anything. Okay, Upendra says +1. Chetan says it is logical for the two persons. Okay, for initial two people it was logical, but others just simply followed them. So probably it was illogical on other people's parts to stand up and clap. Anyone else would like to say anything? So for the two people, it was completely logical because they were instructed a priori that they have to stand up and clap. So they had a logic to do that. But what about the other people? So if we look into this herding behavior, uh, so it is also about something which is diffusing among the people. So here you can see that it was a phenomenon of standing up and clapping, which was diffusing among a population or diffusing within a population. There are other such things which diffuse. Let me say obesity. Do you think obesity can spread from people to people? So if let's say somebody around me becomes obese, is there a chance that I'll also become obese? Or let's say more and more people start smoking in the world. So will it again increase the number of people who start smoking, so on and so forth? Uh, so if we talk about this herding behavior here, there is again a very nice experiment. I don't remember its exact name. It's called the balloon experiment, if I'm not wrong. So what happens is there are a bunch of people standing on a road and they all are looking up in the sky. So anybody who passes through that road actually step back and looks up in the sky. So again, the question is this logical? If there are a lot of people who are waiting on the road and looking up in the sky, should you also do that? And we don't know, in certain circumstances it can be logical, maybe something is going up. So in this particular video which we saw, maybe he was actually speaking something which I couldn't comprehend, and it was actually good. That's why other people stood up and clapped, and that's why I clapped. So again, is it logical or not? So what actually turns out is it depends on the context and the amount of information you have. So sometimes, let's say I have to make a decision, but I do not have the complete information to make the decision. As an example, when all of us we finish our 10th and 12th and we have to decide which institute to join, we are just kids, and sometimes even our parents do not have that complete information to make a logical decision. So that's the time when we turn towards others, ask them for their feedback, for their suggestions, and do that. So it turns out that in the atmosphere where I do not have the complete information, it might make sense to follow others. But if I have the complete information, it might not. So as an example, if I'm solving a mathematics puzzle, which has certain well-defined rules, and I know that the answer is 5 according to a fixed formula, but all my classmates write the answer to 4, I should stick with my answer. Not that everyone is getting 5, I also turn it into 5. So based on that, I'm going to discuss a quick experiment with you, and I'm going to show you how this herding behavior is actually logical in the atmosphere when we do not have complete information. So let's say when you are moving out to a new city and you are deciding which hotel you should dine in, whether it should be restaurant A or restaurant B. So under those conditions, it is a logical decision to follow other people. Now, when you follow other people, the decision which you are making might turn out to be wrong. So for this, let's discuss a very quick experiment here. It's actually called the ARN experiment. So the experiment goes like this. Let's say there is a classroom where this experiment is going on. There is an instructor standing in front of the class, and this instructor has two bags. So one of, let's say this is bag 1 and this is bag 2. One of these bags have two red balls and a blue ball. So we call it the majority red bag. And the other of the bag, it has two blue balls and one red ball, and let me call it the majority blue bag. What this instructor is going to do, he is randomly going to choose any of these bags and he is going to place it in front of the class. There is one bag. I do not know which bag this is. It can be any of these two. Now the experiment starts. One by one, each student comes. So student 1 comes. Student 1 can randomly pick one of the balls from this bag. So he can put his hand in the bag and pick one ball. And by looking at this ball, he has to predict which ball it is, whether it is majority blue. He has to predict which bag it is, whether it is majority red bag or is it majority blue bag. And he has to tell this answer to his friends. In case his answer is correct, he gets a payoff from the instructor, maybe a chocolate. So he spits out some answer here. Then the next student comes, S2. S2 can again do the same. He can also draw one, and S1 keeps that ball back. Now S2 comes, again there are three balls in this bag. He can again pick one ball from this bag and can put it back. Now based on the answer which S1 has given and based on the ball which S2 has seen, he also has to predict whether it's a majority red bag or is it a majority blue bag. So what will happen in such an experiment? Now, whatever we are going to talk now is going to be completely logical. Let's see some different scenarios. So let's talk about student 1 here. Let's say student 1, he fetches a ball and he fetches a blue ball. So what he will say, which bag is it if he sees a blue ball? So the only signal about the bag which he has is this blue ball. So he'll obviously say blue, right? Because there is a greater chance that you will draw a blue ball from a majority blue bag. So for the meanwhile, let me assume that this bag is majority blue. So if student 1 draws a blue ball, he is going to say to the remaining class that this is a majority blue bag. He won't say it's a majority red because that bag only has one blue ball and there is a lesser chance or lesser probability of drawing that ball out. Now student 2 knows that the student 1 has said that it's a majority blue bag. So it's now the turn of student 2 here. Now student 2, he can draw a blue or a red ball. So what if he draws a blue ball? Student 1 has already said that it's a majority blue ball and now I am also seeing a majority blue ball. His belief is all the more reinforced and he also ends up saying that it's a majority blue ball. Coming to student 3. What if student 3 sees a blue ball? He is going to say it's a majority blue ball. What if the student 3 sees a red ball here? What is he going to say? So assume logically you are in the shoes of the student 3 here. There were two students before you and both of those two students said that it's a majority blue ball. And now it's your turn and you draw the ball and it's a red ball. So what are you going to say? So if we talk from a complete logic, you can see this experiment for student 3 as 3 separate experiments. So student 3 can visualize whatever is happening as 3 independent experiments, where in the first experiment, the ball which came out was blue. In the second experiment, because the first person he said it's a majority blue bag. So student 3, he doesn't know what student 1 saw, but he knows that what he spoke. So assuming that everyone is acting rationally in this system, so when he sees that student 1 says that it's a majority blue bag, he's sure that student 1 has also seen a majority blue bag. For sure he knows. Similarly for the student 2, he said that it's majority blue. So again student 3, he's sure that he would have seen a blue ball. If student 2 would have seen a red ball, he would have said it's a majority red. He would have gone with his own signal. So here student 3 is going to see this experiment as if you have drawn a ball from this bag 3 times. First time you saw a blue ball, second time you saw a blue ball, and third time you saw a red ball. So again the probability is higher that it's a majority blue bag for student 3. So even if student 3 sees a red ball, he is going to say that it is a majority blue bag. So that's how herding behavior happens. And next, coming to student 4. What if student 4 also sees a red ball? So again for student 4, he's sure that student 1 has definitely seen a blue ball. Student 2 has definitely seen a blue ball. He's not sure about student 3 because for student 3, whether he has a blue or a red, he's going to say majority blue. So again for S4, it's like 3 experiments with 2 blue and 1 red, and he'll also turn up saying that it's a majority blue bag. So after these 2 incidents where 2 people said that it was a majority blue ball, it doesn't matter after that point in the experiment. Any student, whatever he sees, whether it's a blue ball or a red ball, he's going to say that it's a red ball. So it is the initial 2 people in this population which are deciding the choices for others. And this complete experiment is completely logical. Everyone is completely logical from their whole angle. So what happens in such a setting? Assume that this bag is actually majority blue, and the first student, by chance, he ends up drawing a majority. He ends up drawing a red ball. So he says that it's a majority red bag, and same happens with the student too. He also ends up drawing a red ball. So what's the probability that student 1 draws a red ball from a majority blue bag? The probability is 1/3. And then the second student, with him also it happens the same. He ends up drawing a red ball. For him also the probability is 1/3. And assume that these two coincidences happen. And after these 2 coincidences, every ball with the remaining student draw is actually blue, since it's a majority blue bag. So the remaining students, all of them are seeing blue balls. But what happens, because first 2 people have seen red balls, all of these end up saying that it's a majority red bag. And this entire population goes wrong. So this is what happens in herding behavior, and everybody is completely logical in this population. So with a probability of 1/9, the entire population goes wrong. Which means if you conduct this experiment in a classroom 10 times, 9 times the things will go right. But 1 time in 10 times, on an average, everyone will end up making a wrong choice or will end up giving a wrong answer. And this can again happen when a new product comes. So you can actually, you can actually model this entire thing using the Bayes theorem. So you can look at what is the probability that it's a majority blue bag, given that the ball you have drawn is majority blue, so on and so forth. So not going into the details, what I'm saying is you can use the Bayes theorem to model this entire thing here. And again, you can use the same principles to model, let's say, which is a better product. If there are 2 products which come in the market, and let's say that these products are social networking sites. So there are 2 social networking sites, S1 and S2. And let's say S1 is actually better than S2 and S2 is worse than S1. But because of the herding behavior, if somehow there are certain initial people who end up saying that S2 is better, the entire population will go and say that S2 is better. So that's how entire population can go wrong at times. If you look at these experiments in herding behavior, so what is good in this kind of a modeling is there is no network operating on the backside. So you don't have a network here. You always do not have a network, but still things can diffuse in the population. So you can see it's a population or a crowd-based model. And sometimes the crowd-based models work out to be very, very nice. So if you know about Wikipedia, it's completely operated by crowd, and it gives you like one of the most authentic and correct information, most elaborative information about most of the topics. There is no underlying network. Now coming to the last part, which is information cascades. So the difference between both of these two models here is you use herding behavior in those models where there is no underlying network. Let's say again, I have to buy an iPad. I have to decide which generation iPad to buy. So maybe none of my friends have iPad. Maybe my parents do not have iPad. So my connections are useless to me. And the best option which is available to me is going online and then looking at what other people have to say. I do not have any connections to those people. I simply look at the population and the number of people buying a particular product, and based on that, I decide which product I should go with. So that happens in the case of herding behavior. Information cascades modeling you use in the scenarios when you have an underlying network. So assume that it generally happens in undergraduate classrooms when students are deciding whether to bunk a class or not. Now I have to decide whether to bunk a class or not. Now I'm not going to go online and see in the world how many people bunk, whether bunking is the right thing or not, and then do it. I'll have to simply look at my friends and see what most of the class is doing, because that's from where my payoff is coming. It's my local network which matters there. So that's where information cascades come into picture. And we use all the more a very different model for these, which is a game theoretic model. Do you have any of you studied a game theoretical model before? Do you know what is a prisoner's dilemma? It's a very interesting puzzle. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, again, for prisoner's dilemma, let me share a video with you. So this is a better way of learning some things. You look at this prisoner's dilemma, and after that, we'll discuss how do you use graph theory in modeling information diffusion. Again, once you have watched the video, plus type a plus one in the chat window. Waiting for others to get back. Okay, so the video might have been a bit faster. I actually had to watch it 2 times to understand it completely. So what it is just trying to say is that sometimes we get an payoff for aligning our actions with the other people. So just keeping this thing in mind, we'll try to model these information cascades. We do it when we are on a network. So as you see in this figure over here, I have two friends which want to do some opposite things. So with which friend should I go? So let's take a classic example. I won't say classic, but the one you see in Indian classrooms, and then the same uh, thing here. Let's say I am here and I have to decide whether I have two options. So the first option is sitting and completing a piece of assignment which is given by a teacher. So it's a challenging assignment which one cannot do others. It has to be done in groups, or you need some other thinking caps on. So you need the help of your friends to do it. And the other one is bunking a classroom, going out and enjoying and watching a movie. And definitely you enjoy watching the movie, so you are going to get a payoff for that also. So bunk the class and go for a movie. So what happens is, for doing each of these, I get a payoff. Assume that by doing the assignment, I get a payoff of 3, let's say, and by bunking the class, I get a payoff of 2. So logically, I know that I should sit in the class with my other friends and do the assignment. But there is no point in doing the assignment when no one is ready to do it with me. So assuming that all of my friends are going and bunking the class, I can't do that assignment alone. So we represent this situation with the help of a payoff matrix. So assuming that we have two guys here, A and B, so let's see it between two people. So assuming that I have just one friend, and then we'll extend this situation to a number of friends and then over the whole network for every person. So as of now, I know that if I was alone here and there was no, assuming that it was a classroom of just one person and I was alone here, then there is no issue here. Doing an assignment is giving me a higher payoff. So I better stick around in my home and finish the assignment. Now is the situation, let's say when we have two people in the classroom. So I have one friend with me. Let's say it's A and I have a friend B. Now what happens? My actions will be dependent on this other person. So again, if I go for a movie, I'll enjoy only if there is one person with me. So mostly we go with movie with friends. Generally, we don't go watching a movie alone. So we represent this situation with the help of a payoff matrix, similar to what you would have seen in that classic example of prisoner's dilemma. So let me say this one over here is for the actions of this person, better than A and B. Let me take them to be X and Y. Let me say this is person X and person Y. So these are the actions for X, these are the actions for Y. X can stick around and do the assignment, or he can go and bunk. Similarly, Y can sit around and do the assignment, or he can go and bunk. So we are going to fill all of these 4 columns over here. So if this person X sits and do the assignment and Y also sits and do the assignment with him, both of them end up getting a payoff of 3. So A gets a payoff of 3, X gets a payoff of 3 and Y also gets a payoff of 3. If both of them go for watching the movie together, they bunk the class, taking this action B over here, both of them get a payoff of 2. So actually in this case, the best strategy for both of them is to stick together and do the assignment. If the person X decides to bunk while Y sits and do the assignment, so none of them gains from the presence of the other person. So we say that none of them gets any payoff because they are not doing it together. Similarly, if X does the assignment and Y bunks the class, again both of them gets a payoff of 0, 0. So in this particular case, it turns out that this strategy is the best. Both of them should sit around and do the assignment. So this is when we have two people in the class, but generally we have many people in the class. So we are going to see it again from the perspective of this person X here. Let me just give me a moment. So these are the two actions I have. Okay. Now what will happen? This person X in general will have a large number of friends. So let's say X has some n friends, out of which every friend is free to do what they like. So assume that n has some d friends here, or D friends here who are actually sticking and doing the assignment. So all these are the people who are doing the assignment. Some D people over here, and the remaining of the X axis friends here, they are bunking the class. So these all are those friends who are bunking the class. Now how do X decide what to do? I have more than one friends. So again he can use a very simple formula. So X knows that if he now goes out with these people and bunks the class, what is the total payoff he will get? So by aligning his action with this person over here, he is getting a payoff of 2. Each of them is getting a payoff of 2. So I'm only talking about X, he's getting a payoff of 2. Similarly, from this person to this person to this person to. So it's actually ending up in a payoff of 2 into n minus d. Because d friends here are doing the assignment, remaining number of friends is n minus d, and for each of these n minus d friends I am getting a payoff of 2. X is getting a payoff of 2. And here what is the payoff you get? Here the payoff is going to be 3 into d. Assuming that the entire class previously has decided to, let's say, bunk the class. Now someone in the class said that I'll come back to it again. Okay, so forget it, forget my last line. So these are the payoffs X is getting. So what action he will do? If 3D is greater than 2 into n minus d, he will sit and do the assignment. And if 2 into n minus d is greater than 3D, so depends on what is the value of d here. So depending on how many friends are doing it. So if this value over here is greater, then he will bunk the class and go out for a movie. So how does it generally operate in a population? So let us draw a network over here and then see, and then we'll see how we can quickly code it, and we'll look at the results of a real world network of how information spreads in a network, or how technology adoption happens. Let's say I have a network over here. Some network of a classroom. In this network, initially, everyone has decided that we are going to bunk the class. So initially, every node is B here. Let's say I represent this bunking over here with a red circle. So all these people are initially bunking the class. Each one is getting a payoff of 2 from the other people. The payoff associated with bunk is 2. Now one of these people turns out. So you can see it in a population like how technology arrives. Or let me take this example. So initially everyone was using Orkut. So let's say this is a network in which everyone is using Orkut. Might be a better example for our network here. So this one over here is Orkut. And now something happens, a new technology comes, and a few people here shift to Facebook. So let's represent Facebook with this circle over here. So why a few people will shift to Facebook? Because they find Facebook better. They are getting some payoff out of it. So for few people to shift to Facebook, First of all, Facebook should have a better payoff than Orkut. So assume that the payoff people were getting from Orkut was 2 and Facebook it is 3. Because if people are always going to get lesser payoff from a new technology, they are not going to adopt that. Let's say that there is this person here who initially shifts to Facebook. So he decides that I'm going to use Facebook, right? And now what will happen in this network? People will start recalculating their payoffs. So how do you do that in that case? Let's look at this person here. He recomputes his payoff. So he has 2 friends who are still using Orkut. So he got a payoff of 4 from them, and he has 1 friend who is using Facebook. So he gets a payoff of 4 for Orkut from his 2 friends and a payoff of 3 from Facebook. So this makes no sense. So he doesn't shift. Okay, let's look at this node over here. He has 2 friends. One of them is using Orkut and other is using Facebook. From the friend who is using Orkut gets a payoff of 2. From a friend who is using Facebook, he gets a payoff of 3. So he has a better payoff if he shifts to Orkut. So this person in the next iteration, he doesn't just simply turn now, just keep a note of this. This person in the next iteration is going to shift to Facebook. So I'm going to just have a arrow here. Look at this person here. He has 2 friends for Orkut, 1 for Facebook, doesn't shift. This person, both friends are using Orkut, doesn't shift. This person, 3 people Orkut, 1 Facebook, doesn't shift. This person, both the people, both of his friends are using Orkut, doesn't shift. So this person in the next iteration, he also adopts Facebook. So one more person in the network adopted this technology. Again compute for this node over here. Now only one of his friend is using Orkut and 2 are using Facebook. So getting a payoff of 2 for Orkut and actually 6 for Facebook makes sense for him to turn in the next iteration. This one again no, this one again no, this one both Orkut no, this one again more for Orkut. So this one turns in the next iteration. And now you should see how this technology starts sweeping this entire population. In the next iteration, look at this person, 1 for Facebook, 1 for Orkut. Since the payoff for Facebook is better, he shifts. Now look at this node here. He has 2 friends using Facebook now and 2 friends using Orkut now. Payoff for Facebook is higher, shifts. And it leads to, again, this one also shifts and this one also shifts. So this technology sweeps the entire population. In some cases, it might so happen that after the first or the initial node, nobody shifts. It is also possible that there is some shifting, but at the end, the network settles at a level where half of the people are using Orkut and the other half are using Facebook. So we will actually code that and see all of these examples. So sometimes entire population shifts, sometimes nobody shifts. And what also matters is also which was this first person who initially shifted to Facebook. So we are going to do that with a small hands-on here. So this model is actually called the linear threshold model. So the reason is every node has a threshold here. So just taking it slightly one step further, just writing it in a formula based form. So let's say initially everyone in the population has adopted this technology called B, having a payoff of small b. So here our B was Orkut, and then a new technology comes which is A, having a payoff of small a, and and we can take it in the reverse direction. Let's say this was the old one and this is the new one. The old one was having a lesser payoff, let's say it was 2, and this one is having a higher payoff. So basically the new technology is having the higher payoff, so we have B is greater than A. So when a node will shift, let's compute the payoff for a node. If a node has total n friends, out of which let's say D have adopted the technology A, D friends are going with A, and the remaining n minus D friends are going with B. If you face any doubt at any place, please make sure you ask me, because we are going to use this exact formula for our hands-on. So the payoff which it is getting from these friends from adopting the technology A is A into D, and the payoff which it is getting from adopting this technology B here is B into N minus D. So this person, he is going to shift to technology B only if B into N minus D is greater than A into D. And then you slightly solve this formula. So this becomes Bn minus Bd is greater than A into D, or you can say Bn is greater than D of A plus B, or you can write it down as D is lesser than B divided by A plus B. Where will the N go? Here. Or D by N is less than B divided by A plus B. So this person, he will decide to shift. So what is D by N? D by N is the fraction of his friends who have adopted the technology A. So who are still sticking with the old technology. So he will shift with this new technology B if the fraction of his friends who are sticking with A is less than B divided by A plus B. And we can also write it in a different way. So if I go with this, just a second. So we can actually also write it as, so first of all, if the fraction of his friends who are sticking with the old technology is less than B divided by A plus B, or the fraction of his friends who are sticking with this new technology is greater than A divided by A plus B. So you can also get this from the same formulation. So it will become more clear when we start doing the hands-on. I'll again explain it once there. So let's just take a network and try to implement this entire thing there, and we'll see how spreading happens, how your community detection and communities can affect those spreading. How do you determine which should be the initial people you should advertise your product to if you want it to reach the maximum number of people in your network and stuff like that. So just give me a moment. Okay. Uh, so what we'll do, let's take a real world network for this. And the network which I'm going to take is, I want a smaller network as of now. So I'm going to take a Jackery Karate Club network, which was there on 34 nodes. We'll also simulate it on Facebook, a bigger network, and then see what happens. I'm going to take this network. This is a network on which we are going to do an experiment. So it looks like much like a real world network. You also are would be getting a sense of there are two communities in this network, two big communities and maybe four small ones. We'll also apply a community detection algorithm and see what exactly are those communities. So now what I want to do is the same thing over here. Let's say there is a old technology existing in this system, and then now this new technology wants to take over. So what I'm going to do here is, initially, let's say everybody in this network is having this old technology. A. So I'm going to associate an attribute with each vertex in this network, which is called a technology. And let me use A, that is better instead of using any specific name here. So this is the, let me write down, this is the old one, which is having a lesser payoff. Next, what I will do is, I want a new technology over here to come, and I need to have certain seed nodes from where that new technology starts spreading. So what I'm going to do is, I'll write certain functions over here. So I'll have a function here to which you will give some seed nodes, and those seed nodes will adopt the technology A here. What I'm going to do is I'll call a function here, set seed. And what you can do here, you can pass your graph here and a list here, a list which consists of which are the initial nodes which adopt this technology. So let me say, I say that the node having the index 0 is the first node which adopts the new technology. So we need to define this function here. It will take a G, a graph, as an argument and a list. So this list can have more than one nodes also. So as of now, we are just starting with a seed node or having one, with a seed having only one node. So what will happen for all the nodes in this seed, their technology should change to B. What I'm going to do here, for all the nodes which are there in this list over here, their technology should be changed to this new technology B. Like here, the new one. Then return this graph G here. So now my seed is set. Next, let's say at every point in time, whenever I do anything, I want to visualize this graph and I want to associate a color, let's say red with the old technology and green with the new one. So for that, since we're visualizing the graph again and again after each iteration, let's also do that in a function. I'm going to have a function here, visualize G. Let me just visualize this graph here, and after that we'll send that in a function. So how do I visualize it? Again, making that color dictionary here. So I have a color dictionary, and let's say color dictionary for the technology A should be red, and that for B should be green. And then I can set the attribute for each node, g.vs color equals true. It takes its color from this color dictionary of C for C in, and C takes its value from the technology. So g.vs. I got this here, and let me just load this graph. Colors will automatically come. I want my vertex labels to be printed. You see this graph here, and you can see that this node 0 now appears in the green color. It is the first vertex which has adopted this technology B here. Now we want to start a procedure where all the vertices, all the neighbors will recompute their payoffs and decide whether they have to shift to this new technology or not. So for that, let's make a function which is the, let me name this function as linear threshold. What this function will take as an input is the graph, on which we are doing this. And then let me pass the payoffs for both of these technologies. So we have not yet told the payoff. So the payoff for the old technology and the payoff for the new technology. These are the things I'm going to pass to this, and this function will do the remaining things here. I'm building this step by step. So I have defined LT. I have passed a graph to this, and then I have the payoff for my first technology. I'm just naming that payoff as, let's say, let me simply say A. So this is a variable here for payoff. 2 goes to A, and the payoff for B, the new technology. Now what we have to do here in this function, every node is going to look at its neighbors, and it has to compute how many neighbors have technology A, how many neighbors have technology B. So let's start writing a code for that. So since I want to do it for every vertex, so for V in g.vs, what we should do, I have to compute how many neighbors have technology A and how many neighbors have technology B. So here I am computing the neighbors which are having the technology A. So let me name it as neighbors having technology A, and I'm going to type here g.vs g.neighbors of V. So give me the neighbors of V, but I want only those neighbors who have adopted the technology A. So what is happening here? G.vs, G.neighbors V returns me the indices of the neighbors of this vertex V here. And now for all these indices, I want to see which are those vertices. So I do here a G.vs and apply here a tuck equals to A. So this will return me a vertex sequence of all the neighbors of V which have adopted technology A, which are still having the technology A, the old one. So this is giving me all the neighbors, the vertex sequence, but what I need is just the number. So I'm going to apply a list here. So list also doesn't give me the number, it gives me, it just converts that in a list. I have a list of vertices here. Similarly, I'm going to figure out all the neighbors which have adopted this technology B here. Next, what I want to look at is I can also apply a length function here. It will give me the exact number of friends having the technology A, number of friends having the technology B. And now I need to determine the payoffs. So what is the payoff this vertex is having from the neighbors who have adopted A? This payoff is going to be A into NA. So this is the payoff you get from adopting technology A. What is the payoff you get from B? Is again B, which is the payoff multiplied by number of neighbors who have adopted the technology B. So for now, let's just try to print this out and see whether it's working correctly or not. So I'm going to print each vertex here, and let us print P underscore A and P underscore B. I'm going to print it for every vertex and just comment this. Okay, so instead of it's printing the exact vertex here, let us print only the index of the vertex. So you can see here what is happening. So the vertex 0, payoff from the friends adopting technology A. So all of its friends have only the technology A, 32, 0. Payoff from A, payoff from B. For 2, payoff from A, payoff from B, so on and so forth. So we can see this payoff for every vertex here. Now, next what we want to do, we have to see which payoff is greater, and whichever payoff is greater, we have to change it for that particular vertex. What I have to do, if P of B is greater than P of A. So what I'm going to do here is, in this particular code which I'm building as of now, I'm just doing it for one iteration. So let's see whether we are able to correctly do it for one iteration, and then we'll set it off for all the iterations. So one thing we have to note here, when every node is calculating its payoff, So it doesn't happen. Let's say I first checked for node 0, then I checked for node 1. So is calculating its payoff. So it doesn't happen. Let's say I first checked for node 0, then I checked for node 1, and the node 1 has to shift. So I do not shift it before computing it for node 2. So what happens? Every node will compute its payoff in the current state, and then together they will change. So for one iteration, I'll compute it, what happens for each vertex, and then flip their technologies at once. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to store their choices in a new list here. So if you found the payoff for technology B greater, so what I'm going to do, my new choice is going to be B. I change my technology to B, else I remain in the technology A. So else my list is going to have this technology A only. And at the end of the iteration, I reset the technologies for all of these. So this G.Vs of G.Vs of technology equals to LST. So this is it. And then one more thing here, is when we execute this linear threshold model, so someone who has already shifted to the new technology, he cannot shift back. But based on my current criteria, based on my current code, it can happen. So what happened is, let's say one node shifted to Facebook, one node shifted to the new technology, but then nobody else shifted. Then what may happen, that this node computes its payoff, all of its neighbors are still in the old technology, so it also flips back to the old technology. So that doesn't happen. Somebody who has already adopted a new technology keeps adopting that. He doesn't go back to the old technology. So we need to have a logic for that also here. So whenever we are appending this, so if a node, so for every node, what I'm going to do, initially I'm going to check what is the technology this node has adopted. If the technology for this particular node here is, if G dot Vs of V, if its technology is B, which is a new technology, then I will not check any condition for this node. Its new technology will remain B only. It won't be changed. If you have any doubt till this step, please ask me. And we can also implement this step one level up. So just keep it in mind, we are going to do this. I'll do it in a slightly different fashion here. Okay, so this we have. So this was representing one iteration, but we have to do it for multiple iterations. So this is one iteration. I'm going to repeat this entire process. So there is going to be a second iteration, there is going to be a third iteration, so on and so forth. And when will we stop? We are going to stop at a point when in the current iteration, no node has shifted to the new technology. That means that it's a time to stop if no one turns now. So what I'm going to do, I have to check whether anybody shifted in the current iteration or not. So what I'm going to do here is, so this is my new list after shifting. So I'm going to take care of my old list here. I'm going to have an old list here. And in old list, I'm going to store their previous state. So their previous state was G.Vs. So I have an old state here, and then I have a new state here. So the old state is old underscore LST, and the new state is LST. So I'm going to do this process over here. So what I'm going to do is, this is going to be repeated till the time when this old LST does not become equal to the new the LST, which is a new LST. As soon as both these lists become same, that means nobody has shifted in the current iteration and the process will stop. Now we need to define old LST here also in the first iteration over here. What I'm going to do here, so that my first iteration happens. So here I'm going to set my old LST as g dot vs of text. So what happens? Currently this is my old LST, my new LST is none. So old LST is not equals to LST. I come in my first iteration, every node is checked, and after every node is checked, their preferences are stored in this list over here. So I should have this thing over here inside this bracket here. Every time this list will be changed, so I have this LST here also. And then everybody computes what is their preference, whether they should be shifting to B or to A, and it goes into LST. Here, all that is stored in old LST, and all the nodes change their technologies. And again, you check whether both of these lists have become equal or not, and you do this entire process again and again. Now what remains is that our logic for those nodes which have already adopted the new technology. So they should not change. So what I'm going to do here is, in this while loop, I'm going to figure out which are the nodes which have already adopted my new technology. So we don't have to flip them back to the old technology. So these are all the nodes which have already adopted B. So what I'm going to do inside this for loop, if the node I'm going to look at, so if this node V, it is already there. So if it is in already adopted list, then it will remain there itself. So I'm going to append only this B in our list, and I'm going to continue. That's I'm not going to do these steps again. So I'm not going to compute any payoff for those nodes who have already shifted to B. I have only to look at those nodes who are still in the old technology. So this is how it works. So let's execute it and see what happens. So we got a lot of stuff here. So let's print an iteration at every step. I'm going to have here an iteration equals to 1. At every point, I'm going to print this here. Iteration. Better, I can just print here new iteration. You can see here what happens. So this is one iteration, this is second iteration, and there will be some changes happening over here. So in this case, it stops just after the second iteration over here. Next, we need a way to visualize this graph. So I want to visualize this graph at every point in time. So I'm going to incorporate one more logic here to visualize this graph. And whenever I visualize this graph, I'm going to store it. So it should be stored with a different name every time. So what I'm going to do here is, here I have a variable which is iteration. So in every iteration, I'm going to store this graph, and the graph will store along with in which iteration it was stored. So that will be reflected by the name of your file, which will be stored. So what I'm going to do here is, at every point, I'm going to visualize the graph. I should visualize it at the end. So when everything changes, I'm going to visualize this graph G comma, and I'm going to pass this IT here, and after this, so that it changes in every iteration. Now I have to define this function, visualize GIT, which should visualize this graph and store it along with this iterator in a file. My graph and iterator value. I just changed this variable so that we understand that my function will be using that new variable name. There is no confusion here. Okay, and now I'm going to type that entire thing here. So do I have the code here? Yes. So this code will require, and I'll just have to move this code here to the visualize function. So I have a color dictionary. If it is the technology A, it should be red color. Technology B, it should be green color. You give a vertex every color. So my graph name is G here. I give this vertex a color here, and then I'm going to store this plot. So for storing this, I take it in a variable here. This graph is GR here. I have the vertices label. I can set a bbox, and even this is not compulsory here. So you just store this graph, and then I'm going to save this. The name of my file is going to be LT underscore, and then plus I'm going to include this iterator I in the name of the graph, followed by a .png for the file name. So what is happening ever from the time the iteration started, it will start visualizing my graph and it will be stored as files. So what we need is also our initial graph and our graph after the seed nodes were infected. So we also need to call this visualize function for that. So what I'm going here to do, I'm going to call this visualize function once here. So visualize G, and let me pass the iterator as 0. So this will create my initial graph where everyone was having only technology A. Next, when my seed nodes have been adopting technology B, after that I want my graph, so I'm taking this as Z1. So this is my second graph which will be stored. Then your linear threshold function will be called, and it will. So let me start this IT from 1 here. So now it will start storing my graphs from 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. I think now it is complete in itself. Let's just execute it. So still it goes up to 2 iterations here. Actually, let's delete all of these and run it again. This is your original graph here. This is when my first node, which was the seed node, was infected, and then it infects these 4 nodes, and then the process stops. So the process runs only for 2 iterations here. I think that we are about, we have only 8 minutes left. So what we can just do now is we can just play around with this. So you can see that when we started with the node 0, these are the 4 nodes which got infected and the process stopped. So what if I start with the node 33 here? It seems to be connected to more nodes and more densely. So instead of node 0, if I take the node 33, that might be a better candidate here.
Yeah, Yati madam, what is the best way of choosing the seed node for information diffusion?
If can I go some 10 minutes extra if you don't mind, then I can cover that.
No problem. You can take, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Sure. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to start from this node 33 here, and again before, let me again delete these files here. You can also write a piece of code here which deletes these files automatically every time you run it, and then see how many nodes are infected here. 33, and then these nodes, and then these nodes. All the more number of nodes got infected here. So it means that it depends on your seed nodes, how many nodes will get infected in the end. Okay, so now what I'm quickly going to do is so the question just ma'am asked, how do you choose which are the best nodes for information diffusion? So when you do that, first of all, we need to take into account how many nodes can be there in the seed node. So whenever you do it from the perspective of a company, they have some initial funds with which you can advertise the product to a limited number of people. So let's assume that in the very beginning, we can infect almost, let's say, some 4 nodes. So I can have 4 nodes in the beginning, and now the question is, which should be these 4 nodes? So one way to do that is, so I just need to do one more thing for that. I could not cover that, just give me a moment. So let us take a look at the graph here first. Now I'm going to do some random experiments with this graph here. So I have to choose 4 nodes from where I can start infecting this network here. So before that, so one way it is based on community detection. So let's look at the difference between what happens when you choose the nodes from the same community and when you choose the nodes from a different community. So I'm not going into much details of community detection. I'm just going to do a very simple community detection here. I'm actually going to use a direct function. So I'm going to detect my communities in this network here and then just print them out. So you can also visualize these communities. Rather, let's just visualize them. It might be a better way of looking at it. So this shows you the communities in your graph. I also need the vertex labels. We can see the vertex labels here, and I see some communities in this graph. So we are going to do 2 experiments here. In the first one, let's choose the 4 nodes from the same community. In the second one, we'll choose them from different communities. So let me take these 4 nodes to be these here. Let's say 10, 5, 16, and 6. Where are my initial nodes here? So when I start with these nodes, you can see what happens. The information diffuses. The technology is adopted by all the nodes in the same community here, and then it stops. Now what we are going to do is, let's try to diffuse it from different communities. So let's pick these nodes from different communities. Let's say these nodes here. Let's say 33, 8, 2, and 28. Now, if you look at the network, I started with these 4 nodes in the different communities, and then you can see that a greater portion of the network is impacted. But again, if you see, it appears like this one big community is different than this other community here. So whenever you diffuse something on these networks, this phenomenon happens that one community gets impacted, but it is difficult for the technology to sweep into another community. and you can also establish a theoretical formula for this one. So this is the one rule which we can use if you have some K nodes as seed nodes. So try to pick them from different communities. There is one other method which you can use, and that is called the K-shell decomposition algorithm. Maybe I can just type it in the chat window. You can
Madam,
look
what
it up.
if the communities are overlapping and we have scope of connection between two communities? So will it diffuse to other community nodes also?
Sorry, ma'am, can you repeat your question?
Like you have applied one algorithm for community detection and
Yes.
you have shown us the information spread across the community. So what
Hmm.
if it's a overlapping community detection algorithm we have applied and then we have chosen some seed nodes? So will it diffuse across communities also?
Yes, it
If
will
we have
diffuse.
edge between the two nodes from different communities.
Yes. So what happens is, so again, it calls for more research. So this thing I was just telling you about, K-shell decomposition algorithm. I'm coming back to your question from here. So this algorithm is actually used to determine the most influential nodes or the most dense part of the network. If you impact that most dense part of the network, it will spread widely. And again, what you are saying, overlapping community detection, if you use that, so it has been seen that the nodes which are in most of these communities, so in overlapping community detection, a node will be a part of multiple communities. So if you pick such nodes which are a part of multiple communities, again it will spread more. So if you have done an overlapping community detection, so choose it from different communities. But again, if you try to choose those nodes which are in all these communities, it will spread faster. You'll have to play around with the network and then see. Ma'am, does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Yes. So, do we have specific library for such kind of algorithms here
You have
that can be
specific.
used in community and information diffusion, as you have told, or we will have to make our own code from scratch?
You have specific communities, but I'm not sure how well developed that is in case of Python. So in R
Okay.
iGraph, you have a package, not recalling its name. It's just give me a second, I'll tell it. In the case of iGraph and Python, also you have a library. Just give me a moment. So this one actually, I think it works. Just a second, just give me. Yes, so this is actually NDLIB. I'll type it in the chat window. Uh, this is NDLIB. This one is for Python. So although the manual says it works for both iGraph and NetworkX, I'm sure it works with NetworkX, but with iGraph, you'll have to check this one out. So you can check for its documentation online. In the case of iGraph R, there is a very well-built library. It's called NetDiffuse. So this is if you are working with iGraph in R. I mostly work with iGraph in R. I specifically looked at certain things for Python for this workshop. So even I need to explore more into these NDLIB library.
So, NDLIB is in Python. It's from Python.
It's in Python. It's a Python library.
Okay. Okay.
The second one is an R.
Fine. Fine. So, what do you recommend? Do we parallelly use NetworkX and this iGraph library, or we can totally switch to this iGraph if it is having a better scope and it also covers all the functions in NetworkX?
Ma'am, it totally depends on the context and the kind of project you are doing, and also how
Okay.
comfortable you are with coding. So if you are an expert in coding, you can quickly pick up different packages, then you can actually get your hands on all. If you are working with a small network, let's say a network on 4,000 and maybe up to 9,000 or 10,000 nodes, I'll say network X. But then for a bigger network, you'll run into problems with network X. It will take a lot of time. And I doubt you'll be able to do it with your normal systems. You will require an HPC.
Okay, fine.
Even have you used these community detection algorithms in network X? I couldn't find a lot of them. So specifically, if you are working with community detection, better to shift to iGraph.
Fine, fine.
And again, if you are doing only some computations in iGraph, so a lot of graph computations, I would recommend Python. But if you are doing some visualization and you want very good visualizations, then I'll recommend iGraph in R.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So I think I'm done with it. If you have any doubts, I can answer.
So is this model of payoff or game theory can be used in viral marketing also?
Yes, so this is used in viral marketing. So there is one more model you might want to look at. So this one was a linear threshold model. The other one is called an independent cascade model. So
Fine.
that one, actually, independent cascade model is more used if you are talking about information diffusion. So how you have put the labels on the vertices now. So I know that I have the thresholds for both of these competing technologies, but that's not the scenario if I'm looking at an information diffusion. So in that case, what you do, you have some contagiousness of the information, like a disease again, on the level of 0 to 1. So let's say I say that this thing is viral and I give it a measure of 0.6 in a scale of 0 to 1. Then what I can do in this network, which we just look now, you give every edge a weight of 0.6. So just like we did in the branching model, the difference is only you now have a network instead of a tree. And then you can implement it exactly in the same way. You will have some seed nodes. In branching model, we just had one root. So here you can have multiple seed nodes. All these seed nodes, they will infect their neighbors with this probability of 0.6 in the first step. So now some of the neighbors will get infected. In the next iteration, all these neighbors will try to infect their neighbors with probability 0.6. So you can actually use a random package in Python to implement this, and you can once like linear threshold, you can stop in that iteration where nobody got infected in the current iteration, and it will stop.
So number of iterations, how we decide up to how many iterations we can move on. So even every iteration, the seed nodes are changing or it's getting adding on.
Okay, so seed nodes are fixed. You have 4 seed nodes. Let me start
Okay.
with just one seed node. Let's say I have a 0 as a seed node. So let's say I run it, and in the first iteration, 1 and 2 got infected.
Fine,
So
fine.
now in the next iteration, these 1 and 2 will try infect their neighbors. 0 is gone. So every node gets only one chance to infect their neighbors.
Okay.
So 0 has already done its business. Now 1 and 2 will try. Let's say 1 and 2 end up infecting a node 3 in the second iteration. Let's say in the third iteration, 3 fails to infect any of its neighbors. Then the process will stop after 3 iterations. And your maximum number of iterations can be, so you will stop either in 2 cases. So the first case is in the next iteration, none of the new nodes got infected. It will stop, or your entire network gets infected. That's again a sub part of this only. That in the new iteration, nobody gets infected because everybody is already infected.
Fine, ma'am. Fine.
Yes.
Yes, participants, if you have a query and if you are doing some research in this field, you may please discuss with ma'am. Else, we have reached to the end of session. Yes.
Ma'am, please send the attendance sheet.
Attendance link will be shared. Please kindly convey if you have any query.
No, ma'am.
Okay, fine. So, Yayati man, thanks a lot for highlighting so many, important points regarding information diffusion, various models, how they work, and the scope of research in this area, as you said, and how practically we can go about. So, I hope there can be a lot of things that we can explore more, and we will be happy if you can contribute more towards this your research area in our future courses also. And participants who are really looking into research challenges in social network analysis, they can convey so that we can plan up some another course also. So thank you, Yayati man, for sparing your valuable time for contributing in 4 sessions in this FTP. So I hope
Welcome, ma'am.
participants
Thank
have
you,
really
everyone.
enjoyed the sessions and they have learned a lot from this. So they may apply it later on in their research areas. So thank you, ma'am. So participants, we are ending the session now. And please, I'm sharing the link for attendance. You can just fill your attendance for this session.